go with our next set of notes. So we're going to take a break really quickly from the geometry topics that we've been talking about, midpoint and all of that, and take a look at simplifying square roots, or simplifying radicals is what we also call them, because you are going to have to do this as part of our next piece in geometry, which is the distance formula. It has a huge square root in it, okay? So if you get answers that aren't perfect squares that you can just calculate the square root for, you need to know how to simplify them before you submit your final answer. Okay, so first let's take a look at what is a radical. Okay, a radical is another name for a square root. Another name for square root. Okay, or like a cubed root, right? If you have, it's this shape like this. So if you have like a 3 in there, that's a cube root, right? That's just like shape in general. It's just called a radical. Okay. If we have this here, this is read as radical 4. Read as radical 4, or the square root of 4. Square root of 4, right? We typically say the square root of 4, but if you hear someone say radical 20 or whatever, that just really means the square root of 20, or you can just kind of say those things separately, radical and then the number. Okay, so first we're going to take a look here at simplifying perfect square root radicals. Okay, so when we're simplifying perfect square root radicals, what that means is we're basically taking the square root of a perfect square, right? And a perfect square, by definition, has a square root that's a whole number. Okay, so some of these we're going to look at, like the square root of 4. Oh, well, we know that's 2, right? And negative 2, but I think we're just going to be dealing with the positives here. Square root of 81, that's equal to 9. Square root of 256, so this is a little bit higher. I asked you to memorize the square roots from 1 to 15, and this one's actually 16, right? 15 is 225, so anything above that is going to be more than what I asked you to memorize. But you can use your calculator with this if you need to. Square root of 121 is 11, and so on. Okay, so I'll let you finish this one. Let's hop down here to number 7, where we have these fractions. We did this at the beginning of the year, but I'll give you a little refresher again. So if you have this square root of a fraction here, what we can actually do is we can split this into the square root of 64 over the square root of 81. Okay, and then we can just calculate those separately, which is going to be 8 over 9. Okay, and that's going to be your final answer, 8 over 9. Right, so here would be the square root of 1, which is 1, over the square root of 16, which is 4, right? Just works just like that, okay? Simplify non-perfect square roots. You need to know at least your first 10 perfect square numbers. Okay, so 1 squared 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, what do we want? 8, 9, 81, and 100, right? In addition to this, I have asked you to also memorize 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. So I'll just write those down here. I don't know, just underneath it. So 11 squared is 121. 12 squared is 144, 13 squared is 169, 14 squared is 196, and 15 squared is 225. Okay, so I do expect you to have those 4 memorized as well. All right, so let's get down to the juicy part here, simplifying non-perfect square root radicals. Okay, so that means that the number under the radical is not a perfect square, so we're not going to get a whole number here. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're looking for factors of the number that are perfect squares. Okay, factors of the number that are perfect squares. So you don't need to do this with everyone, but every problem, but I just want to revisit what our factors are, right? Factors are numbers that we multiply together to get a number. So we have here 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. I think that's it. Okay, so now that we have this list of factors, let's see which ones are perfect squares. And actually, I can only, 1 is, okay, we're not ever really going to be interested in 1 because that doesn't help us at all. No 24, not 2, not 12, not 3, not 8. So we have this 4 here. Okay, 4 is our other perfect square. And this is the one that we're going to be interested in, okay? So this is our factor pair, 4 times 6. So we're going to take this square root of 24 and we're going to rewrite this as a square root of 4 times 6. Okay, the 4 and the 6 come from the factor pair, right? I wrote the perfect square first and the other one second. Okay, so now, just like we did with the division, we're actually going to separate these. So I'm going to write this as the square root of 4 times the square root of 6. And then from here, I can simplify this even more. The square root of 4 is 2 times the square root of 6, which we cannot simplify anymore. Let's just double check ourselves here. What are the factors of 6? Well, we have 1 and 6. We have 2 and 3. None of those are perfect squares. So we cannot simplify this any further. So we leave it just as it is here. And so our simplified answer is 2 root 6. And actually, if you take in your calculator and calculate the square root of 24 equals, some decimal, right? And then if you do 2 times square root of 6 in your calculator, you're going to get the same exact decimal, okay? So we know that these two numbers are exactly the same, okay? So let's try another one here. Let's look at 48, okay? So 48, there's a lot of factors here, but basically we just have to ask ourselves, we can go along this line of perfect squares, and we can say, well, which one of these are factors, right? 1's a factor, 4 is a factor, 9, no, 16 is a factor, 25, 36, and then now we're bigger. Okay, so we're going to look at these numbers here, 1, 4, and 16. In order to make this process as fast as possible, like with the least amount of steps anyways, we're going to be looking at the biggest number that is a perfect square, that's a factor. Okay, so 16 would be this case here. So we can write this as the square root of 16 times, what is it going to be, 3? Okay, and then again, the square root of 16 times square root of 3. This simplifies. This is just 4. And then we have root 3. Let's take a look at what would happen if we didn't choose 16, if we chose 4 instead. So we can rewrite the square root of 48 as the square root of 4 times 12. Yeah, times 12. Okay, and then we would have square root of 4 times square root of 12. This would give us 2 root 12. Okay, but at this step we have to ask ourselves here, are there any factors of this number inside the radical still that are a perfect square? And the answer is yes, right? We can write this as, we'll keep the 2 out here, root and then 4 times 3. This would be 2 times the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. 2 times 2 times 3, and then the 2 times 2, we can multiply against each other, multiply each other, and then we would get 4 root 3, which is what we got here if we had just done 16 in the first place, okay? So as long as you're using these factors that are perfect squares, you're going to end up in the right answer, but using the bigger one first is going to result in less steps. Versus if we use a smaller one, we'll have another step here where we need to do this one more time. Okay, so I think that should do it for you. I'm going to give the answer key to the sub. So he has a copy of this. If you need help or you want to check your answers, you can ask him if you're correct. But really the rest of this, so these numbers here on the second page, they get pretty high. But basically what I do, I don't know the factors of 245 off the top of my head. But what I do know is I have a calculator, so in my calculator I say 245 divided by 4, okay, that's not a factor, divided by 9, that's not a factor, divided by 16, that's not a factor. I actually don't know what it is right now. Anyways, I want you to go through all of these, and at the end I do want you to write the summary here. Okay, so your summary should start with, in order to simplify non-perfect square roots, you need to ... Okay, you're going to be writing this ... Okay, so use those flip books that we put in your notebooks. This would be either an explain and describe or maybe a sequence. Look at some of those sentence frames, and that might be able to help you form these sentences here. Okay, so if you have any questions, you can always email me. Just take a picture of what you're looking at and send it with your email so I can see the problem that you're working on. Otherwise, use each other as much as you can. And yeah, the sub will have the answer key. So good luck.